colleagues, in the late 19th century, Rudolf Virchow said that medicine is a social science and politics is nothing more than medicine at a larger scale. Such saying reflects the fact that the human body always tells us a story about society. Too often, such story speaks of endemic social injustice, and that is precisely the case with neglected tropical diseases. However, health continues to be addressed as a sectoral issue. Both global and national public health policies continue to be disease-centered. The economic, social, cultural, political, and psychological dimensions of NTDs continue to be scarcely explored both by research and policy making. From a different perspective, the Universal Declaration on Human Rights affirms the right to health as being inseparable from the right to an adequate standard of living. Also, from a human rights perspective, healthcare systems should be people-centered. Healthcare systems should empower community engagement and participation. From such standpoint, I would like to highlight the following points for further discussion. First, relevant topics such as the ones proposed for discussion would benefit from a rights-based framework because such topics should be addressed not only as technical problems but also as political issues. Same topics comprehend many of the state's duties under national constitutions and international human rights obligations. Persons affected by NTDs should be properly regarded as rights holders and not just as passive beneficiaries or even worse, as patients. Second, besides important gaps on existing global and national health policies, there are gaps in how certain issues are addressed, and I would like to focus on those. Social determinants seem to be restricted to water, sanitation, and hygiene, when the right to work, the right to education, or the right to social protection are equally important for ensuring substantive equality. Stigma and discrimination are persistently narrowed to the micro level of social interaction and seen from the perspective of a functionalist understanding of stigmatization. Same stigma and discrimination are considered to be consequences of the disease, while in fact they are also causes in a sort of looping effect and should be firmly recognized as social determinants of health and illness. Important gaps also concern the recognition of the specific conditions faced by groups living in vulnerable situations, especially those whose lives are structurally subjected to intersections of disease with age, gender, race, disability, among other grounds of discrimination. One outstanding example is the fact that there are no child-friendly treatment options for treating leprosy, which many times leads to treatment dropout. Another gap concerns the limited guarantees given to the right to participation. Participation must be ensured in all public affairs that relate to people's lives, including policy making, monitoring, and evaluation. Participation is also connected to other missing topics such as empowerment, leadership, networking, self-organization, self-determination, all of which are central to people-centered policies and strategies. Advocacy should be primarily undertaken by people affected by NTDs, and NGOs should support people-affected self-organization, both technically and financially. Third, mental health cannot be restricted to the availability of effective referral within national healthcare systems, but should be part of guarantees to the continuum of care, comprehensive treatment, rehabilitation, prevention, self-care, pain management, and community-based services. Importantly, mental health should be ensured through an holistic approach, which should be ethically respectful, culturally appropriate, gender-sensitive, and empowering to individuals, making use of peer support as an integral part of recovery-based services. Fourth, and with regard to implementation by both national and subnational levels of government and administration, it is critical to clearly define responsibilities. ranging from ministries to public servants working on the ground. It is not realistic to assume that the health ministry alone will implement cross-cutting interventions. Multi-sectoral action is the key to such an ending, but in order for it to be effective, it is necessary to clearly define who does what and who is accountable for what. And lastly, a word on gender. Please note that gender is not the same as women's issues as it is so many times assumed. Gender is a much more complex category, but let's focus here on women affected by NTDs. My mandate has dedicated considerable efforts to visibilize the barriers women affected by leprosy face to enjoy their human rights, including their right to the highest attainable standard of health. In 2019, I have presented a report to the Human Rights Council titled Stigmatization has Dehumanization, Wrongful Stereotyping and Structural Violence Against Women and Children Affected by Leprosy. And one thing is certain, women affected by leprosy are subjected to shameful, structural, institutionalized, physical, psychological, and sexual violence in all regions of the world. Harmful stereotypes and traditional practices and institutionalized structural and interpersonal discrimination intersect with the already subordinated social location of women and children in many societies, with severe manifestations of physical, sexual, and psychological violence and systemic informal segregation. The shamefully low participation of both social groups in civil society organizations, health services, decision-making processes, and institutional bodies contributes to all this. My latest report to the General Assembly, titled An Unfinished Business, Discrimination in Law Against Persons Affected by Leprosy and Their Family Members, describes how the limited economic independence and autonomy of women affected by leprosy makes them more vulnerable to the more than 100 laws that continue to discriminate against persons affected by leprosy worldwide. For example, the mere existence of such laws hinders women's access to justice in demanding enforcement of the rights that are entitled to them after divorce. It is my firm belief that participation and gender are sine qua non topics for any strategy or policy that aims at tackling the multiple vulnerabilities and intersections that keep denying persons affected by NTDs the enjoyment of rights and access to opportunities on an equal basis with others. And that is only one of the many reasons why I invite you to listen carefully to Paula Brandão. Thank you.
Senhoras e senhores de alguma senhora, nós mulheres somos socializadas para o cuidado. Esta frase não é minha, mas ao ouvi-la, reconheci tanto a minha trajetória quanto a da maioria das mulheres e fêmeas existentes neste planeta. Nós mulheres somos educadas para o ato de cuidar. Cuidamos dos filhos, cuidamos do parceiro ou da parceira, cuidamos da família, cuidamos da comunidade, cuidamos dos nossos colegas e ambiente de trabalho. Enfim, cuidamos, cuidamos, cuidamos. Por isso hoje venho questionar-lhes: quem cuida de nós mulheres? Somos invadidas e regradas por padrões culturais e estereótipos do que é ser uma boa mulher. Para isso, nos venderam a meta da Mulher Maravilha. Nós precisamos ser educadas, ter conhecimento sobre vários assuntos, casar, ter filhos, trabalhar, manter um lar organizado, atender ao parceiro, cuidar dos idosos e ainda praticar a caridade e compaixão com os necessitados. Mediante a tantos papéis em meio à pandemia de Covid-19, nós, mulheres do mundo, nos vimos com medo e, ao mesmo tempo, imbuídas da responsabilidade de cuidar. Medo de perder nossas vidas e desamparar de cuidado a vida daqueles que amamos, medo de perder aqueles que amamos e o sentido de nossas vidas. Entretanto, não apenas o medo da perda fez parte deste contexto, mas as perdas concretas como da família, dos amigos, do trabalho, do bem-estar físico e mental. Muitas de nós sofreram com a doença, a fome, a violência e tantos outros sofrimentos pré-existentes, entre eles a hanseníase. Nós, mulheres afetadas pela hanseníase, sofremos como todas as outras mulheres imersas em um contexto de desigualdade e injustiça social. No entanto, vimos repetir parte da história da hanseníase, refletida no isolamento compulsório, no desconhecimento, na separação dos filhos de suas mães, na priorização de vacinas para os ricos e da falta de assistência aos marginalizados. A interseccionalidade a que nós, mulheres afetadas pela hanseníase, estamos expostas, tanto é resultado da discriminação estrutural quanto produz a discriminação. E neste contexto, nos vimos sem diagnóstico, sem tratamento, sem medicamentos, sem reabilitação, sem informação e sem cuidado. Senhoras e senhores, não é suficiente nos incentivar ao autocuidado. Nós, mulheres afetadas pela hanseníase, precisamos de meios para colocá-lo em prática. Acesso à educação, a cuidados de saúde, à alimentação, à moradia e à renda. Precisamos ter direitos como pessoa humana garantidos e assim cuidarmos de nós mesmas. Eu sou Paula Brandão, mulher afetada pela hanseníase, enfermeira, professora e voluntária do Mohan.